The America's Cup has been done and won 7-3 to Emirates Team New Zealand. The second time they have successfully defended the America's Cup in what was a great showing of development, design and on-water performance. I'm very excited to have with me today to wrap up our AC chat and wrap shows. My name's Nick Douglas for Adventures of a Sailor Girl. My pleasure to be here. And we do have with us a friend of the show. He broke the drought for those who could defend the America's Cup. He was the successful challenger the first time around with Australia too. And he has done so much more than that for our sport on and off the water, including a bronze medal, including being involved with so many aspects of our sport. He's recently retired from being the president of Swimming Australia. Gosh, he's given our country so much, and we're so lucky to have him here with us today to talk about a topic that we both love, the America's Cup. John Bertrand, so nice to have you with us.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here.
Excellent. And take two, our internet is on fire today. I'm really excited that we can wrap up what was an amazing edition of the America's Cup. I mean, who would have thought that we would see such close racing? And I think it really lived up to all of its expectation.
Well, absolutely. And, no one knew because these boats were all brand new designs, of course, designed in a computer in, I guess, late 2017 by the Kiwis. No one even knew where they're going to fly, let alone, Anyway, there was speculation globally, which is all part and parcel of the America's Cup, but they were so extreme. And then we saw incredible racing. So great credit to all the syndicates in terms of the application of technology to optimize their own projects to a very high level. And ultimately we saw some fabulous racing with Team New Zealand against Luna Rosso. No, it was great. Great America's Cup. The America's Cup is alive and well, that's for sure.
It totally is. Now, you mentioned 2017, so just after Bermuda, Emirates Team New Zealand had taken over, and out came a little video showing us what the future might look like. Let's have a little bit of a look back in time to see what the first views of the AC75 looked like, and then we'll come back and chat a little bit more. Here we go.
dramatic what's happening at the moment. Really dramatic. So the lead changes for the fourth time. Here we go to mark number 3 in the last leg of the race.
So, they were pretty close, apart from a few little features, the code 0, the open cockpit, JB.
Yeah, well, just that was the first stab at it, and look how they ended up, though. Aerodynamic projectiles.
Yeah.
As they, these things are travelling up to close to 100 kilometres an hour. Approach speed, in some cases, you could almost say 200 kilometres an hour. One boat coming at another, if they were. At any rate, big progress over that period of time, and massive research by highly talented people from all around the world focused on this project. And then, of course, these sailors and their feedback from the water back to the design engineers is all part and parcel of this closed loop feedback that each of those syndicates had to have to get these boats up to the level that they were racing at. So massive uplift. It's a great story about application of technology and innovation, led by the Kiwis, no question about that.
Absolutely. I mean, we heard coming out of Bermuda that the simulator had been a big part of their America's Cup program, and we'll talk in a little minute about the next level and the next stage of that as well. So the first time that we got to see all of these boats match up was part of the America's Cup World Series event. It was rumoured that the Kiwis would be exceptionally fast. It was interesting that we saw that Ben Ainsley's team, Ineos Team UK, were not as fast as expected, and New York Yacht Club, American Magic, were the only team to beat the defenders, Emirates Team New Zealand. So I've got a little recap of that part of the Cup if we want to have a look at that too. Here we go.
It might have been just 4 days, but the Prada America's Cup World Series and the Christmas Cup were special. The first ever events raced in the new AC75s. The only chance for the defenders to race against the challengers, and an invaluable opportunity for all as they started the road to the 36th America's Cup. Lack of wind on the final day meant that despite an attempt at running it, the Christmas Cup sadly had to be cancelled. So, after 3 days of racing, and with the America's Cup World Series to their name, it was Emirates Team New Zealand that were the team to beat. The defenders had set the bar. So how did they achieve their victory? Their winning streak was consistent. They beat Ineos Team UK in both of their matches, easily. They did the same to Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli, although in the second race it was close, just 16 seconds. But the one team they didn't dominate was American Magic, who pushed back on the first day to score a win. They nearly did the same in their second match, but tripped up in a poorly executed tack that lost them the lead. At times they had other problems too, including a near capsize. But by the end of the America's Cup World Series, it was clear that among the challengers and on points, this is the top team. A team that can perform over a much wider range of wind conditions than perhaps even they expected.
Gonna come back this side, buddy. I'm good down there.
Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli came close. In their second race against the Kiwis, they were very close. This was also the last of the series, and the one that would decide the overall trophy. But what we also know is that the home team isn't perfect. A wheelie, falling off their foils, nearly hitting a mark, a move that could have destroyed their boat, and being pushed out at the start. This series showed the challengers that the defender has weak points as well.
4, 3, 2.
On this score and at the other end of the points table, Ineos Team UK were in big trouble. First, control problems hampered their performance, then a breakdown. And then the confirmation that in light winds at least, their boat was reluctant to fly. With no points on the board, they have the biggest mountain to climb if they are to get on the pace in time for the Challenger Series, the Prada Cup that starts on January the 15th.
Interesting to look back. The pick of the bunch was New York Yacht Club, and Ineos were struggling. Emirates Team New Zealand were fast but still learning how to sail their boat, and I think that's the answer for everyone here, JB. They were still learning how to sail these boats even just a few weeks ago. And yeah, which is just amazing.
I thought that video was a pretty good summary of where they're at. You know, the Ineos are in real trouble, and speaking to some of the people internally, they really were struggling there. But you know, it's not surprising. These projects are created and built halfway around the world from each other, so they're in total isolation. So to expect them to come together and to be equal in speed straight off the mark is a high expectation. And of course, we saw the Ineos technical team in collaboration with Ben and his guys on board, turn that project around so that they came out with much better performance around the track after the Christmas series. But again, a development race all the way through, and also the Kiwis in that pre-Christmas regatta, they showed that they were well advanced with their project. It was pretty scary actually at that time of the game.
It was very scary, and that's something that is different as well, seeing the defender actually get involved. I mean, when you were racing, you had no idea. The intrigue around what was to come was intense. It's so different. Yeah.
Of course, in my era, there were multiple defenders, all representing, as it turns out, the New York Yacht Club. And so they had very, very intense racing themselves, and that was tradition. And it's only fairly been a new evolution or development that one country's fielded one defender only. And of course, in New Zealand, it makes sense because their financial resources are so limited. To have multiple defenders racing off against each other, in theory, is good, but where does the money come from? As we say in the world of America's Cup, no cash, no splash. You might best sailors in the world and the best ideas in the world, but if you don't have the bucks to make these things happen, then it's just not going to happen. So the Kiwis, they were well advanced pre-Christmas, and then really no racing. At least they got a litmus test of where they're at, but no racing right through until, as it turns out, the America's Cup finals, which has just happened.
It's really interesting that you say no cash, no splash. I've had a few questions sent to me in advance talking about no cash, no splash. And basically then people asking, will we ever see another Australian challenge, which we hear often. And I've actually prepared a video clip for you, JB, which isn't in your list, but I actually prepared an answer for you from Tom Slingsby, if you like. So then you can expand on that one. So here's Tom Slingsby answering the question about an Australian challenge. Take that on your behalf. Watching this America's Cup, doing the Sail GP, there's so many people calling out, Nick, what's happening with Australia and the America's Cup? So I have to ask you the question because there's a bunch of people asking it online as well. Is there ever a possibility that we'll see an Australian America's Cup team?
There is.
Sorry.
Do I have a lead? No.
Yeah.
I don't have anything going. After the last America's Cup, I had some traction and got a bit of momentum there, but ultimately couldn't raise enough money. This time, I don't have really those leads. I'm totally open if one of them pops up.
Anybody out there?
At the
Please
moment,
help.
Yeah, anyone out there? But for sure, there could be something going on. It's not with me. I hope there is something going on. I'd love to be a part of it. If not, I'm just stoked to see an Australian team out there. I think next time could be really good. I think Team New Zealand, look, when they won the America's Cup off us, they said we want to make it a bit more traditional. They didn't do that, but I'm quite glad they didn't. They wanted more teams, and they haven't had that. It's because the costs have been too high. I think they've got a revolutionary boat. I think they could downsize it They could make it a little bit simpler and less design scope, even though so many things are very cool, but all the development in the sails, if other than the little batwing sail on Magic, you can't tell the difference really in the sails, and they would have spent $10 million on sail development for millimeters here and there. Things like that, I think you can really cut down on. This is my 2 cents, and everyone's got their own opinion.
We love speculating on here. I think I'm going to rename it to Adventures of a Speculating Sailor. So go for it.
That's a good idea. Yeah. But I think they can reduce the costs.
Yeah.
This America's Cup was very, very expensive, and that kept a lot of the challenges out. I think just say they went to a 55-foot version of this boat, made a couple of the aspects of the design one design. They rolled on with the momentum from this time. The costs will come down by half, and then all of a sudden we've got an opportunity for an Australian team. We've got an opportunity for a lot of teams. Next time round, if New Zealand win and they do a few of these things, I think you could have 12 teams competing, and that would just be amazing. I'd love to be a part of something like that, and hopefully it happens in the future.
So I just gave a little handball there for you, JB.
That's great.
There's multiple people asking in the comments live about an Australian challenge, so I thought I'd have that one prepped and ready to go. But he brings up some interesting points that we can talk about down the line of the show with the Challenger of Record or another day, because it's such a massive issue, I think, to unpack. But you say no cash, no splash, and it's truer than anyone can imagine.
Absolutely. You basically need an entrepreneur who's basically said, well, I'm worth X billion dollars. And what am I going to spend my money on? Okay, well, global obesity, various health issues, absolutely. All these things, you look at the Bill Gates Foundation, what they're doing. Twiggy Forest, terrific in terms of green hydrogen, zero, carbon emission, all that sort of things. Very, very important. However, there's some people that say, okay, well, I can go to the moon for 25,000 US, 25 million, I should say.
Yeah.
Or maybe I could win this crazy thing called the America's Cup. Well, let's give it a fly. So you have the ability to write a so-called check for, in Australian dollars, 150 mil. Then you can play the game at a global level. So that's the reality of it. However, this thing is amazing. The prestige, as I've said before, it's you don't have companies like Louis Vuitton and Prada involved because of just a good feeling. It's because of global branding and global prestige that this thing called the America's Cup exhibits. It's been going for 170 years. It's the longest running sporting event in modern history. Supersedes any other sport, and it will continue on, and it will capture people's imagination all around the world. So it'll be interesting. But anyway, Australia ultimately one day will be back into the America's Cup. There's no about that. We've got great talent, a lot of knowledge. I'd love Tom to be right there front and centre. Be fantastic.
Yeah, I hope we're both there, JB, cheering them on. There would be nothing better. And there's a few people asking, do you think we'll see 12 boats again? Do you think we'll see this? Do you think we'll see that? I know I joked in that clip and said we're Adventures of a Speculating Sailor here, but that they're really variables that we can't tell. But what we have seen in this Cup, and what was really lovely, was to see a return of the New York Yacht Club, American Magic. They had not been involved in the Cup since you actually took that title off them, JB, Australia 2 in 1983. Now, a story that I don't know whether I've shared with you, Terry Hutchinson, we were actually messaging yesterday again. I've had him on my show before. He was actually the guy, the 15-year-old catching the ropes for Dennis Conner. That's where Terry was during 1983. So he was there catching the ropes and heard the stories from Dennis Conner about how it all unfolded from that side. So he felt incredibly privileged to represent New York Yacht Club. And then we saw them come out with a bang, and I probably shouldn't use that word in close proximity, but it really changed the outcome of this series. Was just one moment and that bear away. So I think we have to pay tribute to the New York Yacht Club, JB, and everything they achieved to get to this America's Cup. and then also to get back on the water after this incident. So I might show a little clip of just what went down. Here we go.
I'll stay here. Water. Turning down at
40 seconds before we tacked, it was blowing 12.5 knots of wind. And when we tacked to bear away, it was blowing 23.5 knots of wind. And when you look at the wind graph, the time from 18 knots to 23 knots is about 3 seconds. Down, the back stays eased, but then the next thing that happens there is the main sheet gets eased, and that loads into the leeward runner. That's not the reason that the boat tipped over. It was a combination of a couple things that led up to that moment. We're going to do whatever it takes, and that's what we've done from the get-go. There has never been a waiver in the commitment being from Doug and Hap and Roger and the New York Yacht Club, or from our team members. I mean, we're all in this together. We're going 47 knots or something, and there's transverse structure inside the boat, and then there's a longitudinal structure. And so the boat, when you look at it in slow-mo, popped quite a wheelie. The leeward foil came out of the water, and we got a reasonable amount of bow altitude up. And when the boat slammed down, it's fine if it slams flat on its keel, but when you land on the side on the flat panel, basically the structure inside the yacht just guillotined the panel. In seriousness, it'll be a big effort to get the boat to go sailing for the semis, and we have a realistic timetable. We have great support from the Auckland maritime and boat building community to help us. We've had great support from all the teams. Everybody has offered up their services to get Patriot back on the water. I think what we're going to see over the next 8 to 10 days is the boat get rebuilt, and she might not come out of the shed as pretty, but she's going to come out of the shed, and we're going to get back into racing.
And they did get back into their racing, and that was an amazing feat to see them get back on the water. But it wasn't the same, was it, JB?
No, it really was a turning point. Let's face it, they were the gun syndicate coming out of the Christmas series. And, I'm told that that hole on the side, the actual splicing, the carbon fibre splicing, had to go over about an 8-metre length of the hull. Massive. But the biggest issue is not so much the rebuilding of the hull, but it was the whole replacement of all the electronics. And okay, they had their pace boat there. They moved a lot of the electronics, and of course the canting part of the foil on one side, on the side, which was destroyed. So they had to rebuild a big chunk of the boat, and they didn't have the time to do it all and to fine tune and get all the software to be working correctly. It was a huge challenge for them. They put up obviously great fight, but they were never in the game after that capsize. A tragedy for the project. However, the New York Yacht Club, I think they're in there long term.
Yeah.
And people like Roger Penske race team in the US in terms of motor car racing and so on. That's IndyCar racing. He's a winner through and through. He's the biggest car dealer in America, and these guys don't take prisoners, so I think they'll be back. They'll learn a lot from that project, and they'll be stronger than ever.
So true. And I think we've seen a lot of teams learn a lot from this with crossovers into motorsport, not only Penske, but also Ineos Team UK with their connections to the Mercedes race team and the Ineos F1 circuit. There's a lot of crossover happening now, which we've touched on previously, but with New York Yacht Club not being able to step up to the plate due to their accident, that left the battle between Ineos Team UK and Luna Rosshill, or they're now calling him Giacomo Spitali, which is James Spithill in Italian. So I have a little package which goes over the last race that we saw with Ineos and Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli in the round robin, where we saw the 9 lead changes, where they'd been exceptionally close. And Ineos had improved so much, we were all wondering whether they'd be able to make another jump in the shed, or whether Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli really had made as many communication advances as we had seen versus New York Yacht Club in the semi-final, which was a 4-0 affair. And we've got a few little expert opinions in there on what they might what they expected to see happen as well. So here we go.
No, good there. Nice. Here you go, mate.
Yeah, it's such an intriguing matchup. Not only is it the different roles of two helmsmen versus a helmsman tactician. You heard Bruni say it about 5 times. He said, "Look, we've got Ineos next. Like we need payback," and they really felt that loss, and that's a good thing. You need that motivation. It gets you up in the morning. It gets you training harder. It gets all the team motivated to put that extra in. So that's hopefully Ineos still have that drive, even though they got the win, and because it's very obvious to see that Luna Rossa do, and they're going to be coming back fighting. And yeah, my tip for Luna Rossa to win the Challenger Series is it's going to be close. I actually don't know who's going to win. I think a lot's going to come down to wind conditions.
Worked very hard on the boat, of course, and we pushed hard to get that extra time to make the modifications. And again, our team have really stuck to the task of trying to get every ounce of performance out of the boat, as we know we have to in this game. And so it's been a tough period particularly for the shore team, turning the boat around. And then the last 10 days or so, we've been back on the water and trying to get the intensity up and make sure we're match fit for this competition.
Since we raced them last time, we have a new foil, we have a new modified mast, we have a new set of sails, a lot of development on the software of the system of the boat, and then a lot of improvement in the especially in the comms on board. We did a lot of mistakes when we raced against them, and we want to try to come out with one less mistake than them this time. So yeah, we're ready to sail in any condition.
I think it's going to be a fantastic fight. I mean, that's why you compete, because you want to be up against the best and you want to challenge yourself and you want to be in those situations. I fully expect we're going to have some amazing racing over the next week or so. We've shown that in the final race we had against the two teams. I think 9 lead changes, pretty even boats most of the time, and that's what you want. I think it's great for the America's Cup and for sailing.
I think we're going to see fireworks from Ben Ainsley and Jimmy Spittle. I think both Ineos Team UK and Luna Rossa Parada Pirelli are teams who are expecting to do match racing, not just win on speed. So I think we're going to have them throw everything at each other.
That's the chief umpire, Richard Slater. And what everyone expected to be fireworks, I guess somewhat fizzled, JB. We saw that Luna Rossa really had improved as much as they showed in that semi-final.
Yeah, I think both in the subtleness of speed as well as their communication ability on the boat. Between Bruni and Spittle, that became very refined compared to and let's face it, they learned from the experience, the tough infighting they had against Ineos and Ben Giles. They learned from that, so they became much more race hardened and much slicker in terms of ability to make the right decisions at the right time under these, super high speeds that these boats are travelling at across the water. We're talking about microsecond decisions and in a sense of intuitive decision making. In many ways, you can't script most of the moves that were happening because you've got to actually attack the boat. They're travelling at 30, 40 knots, 70, 80 kilometres an hour, and to just speculate exactly when they can actually turn the boat to get their wind shadow feeding into the opposition's sails to leeward. Pretty subtle stuff. Very refined sailing.
Wasn't that an amazing development too? The wing wash or the dirty air in this series, we all learned a lot from that. And that's something that I didn't point out in that initial video with the AC75. They were predicting boat speeds of 20 knots, 22 max when they hoisted their code zeros. They're way off in speed. So that was a big difference there as well. They out-planned themselves.
Well, we saw some of the speeds up to 53 knots in their barrelway, and they're into full cavitation then. In other words, these foils are cavitating, the water is boiling because the pressure is so high on one side of the foil compared to the other. So it's going into vapour around the foil, and that's like a sound barrier. That's, we're talking about Chuck Yeager and the right stuff in the 1950s where they they thought, what happens beyond the sound barrier, the boom. Well, these boats are hitting that aquatic sound barrier, 50 knots plus. There's no question that they'll solve that. There'll be a hydro aero solution. There will be somewhere. And then they may be going to 60 knots next time around. Who knows?
And breaking the fastest speed record that we've seen on a boat thus far, which would be incredible, also by an Australian. Well done, Mr. Larson. But basically, the Prada Cup final was a little bit of a disappointment. We did see Ineos Team UK take one win, and then we were all wondering what would happen, because when we were in Bermuda, JB, the best part of the series was Artemis Racing versus Emirates Team New Zealand in the Challenger Series. It's usually the race that's the closest. They're usually the ones that come the closest because they haven't seen the rules. So we're all wondering what was ahead. But I have a 1.5 little minute spec of what happened in the Prada Cup final, because we've got to watch that race where Ben Ainsley did take his one win as well. He wasn't completely defeated.
The speed, yeah.
Yeah, all the way. He's
They're
high.
down. Onboard.
All the way. Better, mate.
Copy.
The first race where we saw Ineos Team UK off the foils, and a big win to Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli.
Two water one.
Nice.
Nice, going. Building speed. Yep. Good pressure here.
My trap.
Mine. Board out. Okay, going board. Okay,
Go, boys, go, big one. Go.
He follows.
Clear, on the line.
26 there. My wheel. Okay.
Free roll.
Board up. Down.
Your wheel.
Fast.
Easy.
Oh, bad one more in.
Killing
Stand by,
two.
board down.
Board's going down.
Board down.
Board's going down.
Two more.
Maybe
more.
we jive and we go into position.
Two more, says Jimmy.
Wait on. He'll be late. Killing.
Go.
Up now. My pitch. There we go. Nice.
Please
Okay, good angle there.
Ineos Team UK led back and took their first win. Grinders hammered on board. So that was it. One more win to Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli.
Fantastico! È bellissimo! È bellissimo!
And Keke was finally able to be Italian. But I think what we saw there as well, JB, was what we come to expect in the Challenger Series, a lot of race practice for Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli.
Yeah, they're getting pretty slick in the end. There's no question about it. And Jimmy was becoming obviously very confident with his starting ability. And it was setting up to be, all speculation. How is New Zealand going to come out of out of the series with no match racing practice? But they're doing a lot in the simulator, and as we learnt later, a lot with artificial intelligence partnerships as well. So all of those things again, but regardless of that, we saw the Luna Rossa program very, very strong in the finals. That's for sure. Obviously, in the beginning of the regatta.
Indeed, and Jimmy was getting fired up on the start line as well against Ben Ainsley there, which was great to see. You and I have spoken about it off air, JB, and I've interviewed Keko about it. Keko's very left-handed and Jimmy's very right-handed, and that's how they chose left and right of the boat. But you thought exactly what I thought. Why not put Jimmy on the starboard side for the pre-starts?
Well, I thought, let's face it, Spittle's, this is his world, match racing starting. So I'd be surprised, regardless of left hand or right hand, he wouldn't be starting the boat. I also felt, from a public relations point of view, to have just an Australian with his strong Strine accent as the overall skipper of the boat, fronting Luna Rossa Prada, with all the beautiful history of the Italian fashion industry behind them. That was going to be a bit much. But again, they did it very, very well. This dual helmsman thing, dual helmsman, it was pretty impressive. There's no question about it. I think they maximised the performance of the overall project, and great credit to them.
Absolutely. And as you say, the class of the Italians, I'm not sure how Jimmy Spittle has a more broad Australian accent than you and I, JB. given that we've been spending a lot more time here.
That's right. Well, but yeah, great credit. And Jimmy will be back in next time, almost certainly, with the Luna Rossa project.
I think.
It's again, Jimmy started off, I think he was about 21 years old with Young Australia in Auckland, New Zealand, in the year 2000 with a band of young kids. Sid Fisher was the sponsor behind that. And that was his start. And he was seen as a young, aggressive young Turk then on the starting line. And that's been part of his signature all the way through with his various America's Cup involvements. And he'll continue with that. Very, very good operator.
It's fantastic. And as you say, the Italian connection is strong. So I have a little bit of a package from before the Cup match. And Bertelli himself actually made an appearance at that press conference. So it was nice to see him get involved with that press conference and hear what the previews were. Because remember, at this point, we'd not seen Emirates Team New Zealand actually racing anybody since December and the America's Cup World Series. Let's have a little bit of a look.
Io direi che in queste situazioni non siamo mai tranquilli.
Well, you can never be that confident in this kind of situation. It's 21 years later, we're still here for the final match, and we'll see what happens. But I agree. We don't really know much about boat speed. We can kind of guess, but of course we don't know exactly. Much will depend on the wind conditions, wind shifts. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I think it's a mystery for us, just like it is for everyone else. Obviously, we have a pretty good feel, and both the teams have been sailing in a similar patch of water a lot. But until we get to that first race where we actually get to line up and come off the start line together, and that'll be the first time I think both teams will really have a good feel for how that speed's going.
I think it's hard to judge performance by just watching the two boats sailing. We know they're fast because we sailed against them more than 2 months ago, and we saw them sailing during a few practice.
We obviously learned a lot during the Christmas Cup, but we've also learned a lot, watching the Challenger Series, unfold, and we've been putting a lot of those learnings into practice, racing our chase boats. So, we feel like we're as ready as we can be.
How do you feel about this straight in here, Ben? Oh, he's going to capsize.
They each had their moments. However, in the warm-up to the match.
No law. 2, 1, away you go. Hurry up.
Your start flag. Yeah, I will flag it.
Tomorrow's the day where it gets exciting, and we actually get to go and race and find out for real.
Everyone is really ready to go out racing tomorrow, and the message I passed to them: we got nothing to lose. We can only win.
We can only win, said Max Serena, though I know on the last day of the Cup he wasn't feeling that way. He was very, very distressed because they did come close in the end, JB. Everyone thought it might be 7-0, but we saw it go to 3-all.
That's right. And they'll go, they're back in Italy now. They'll go back as heroes, as they should. They sailed beyond what most people thought they were going to be able to achieve. And it was a great challenge, great project for Mr. Bertelli. I think this is his 5th America's Cup challenge. It sounds like he's going to be back again, which is great. And to go they got up to 3-all. It was compelling viewing. And then I think what we saw is the Kiwis really starting to get their act together and sailing the overall potential of the boat that they had underneath them. And as I keep saying to people, this business about fast boats, slow boats, you don't go and buy a fast boat off the shelf. These boats are created by people and the application of technology and the tools over quite a long time. And it's a little bit very, very similar to the world of Formula 1 motor racing, where you have a car and then you put the world's greatest drivers in those cars, and those drivers give very, very accurate feedback back to the design engineers on how to potentially improve that car in terms of the balance, aerodynamic downforce and so on, so that the performance has really just been improving all the time. And it's exactly the same with these America's Cup projects. The so-called fast boats, it's a misnomer on where it comes from. It comes from really astute people, both on the land, in working with the computers, simulators, supercomputers and so on, the sailors, and these sailors are engineers and they're flight controllers. We talk about flight controllers now, and the feedback back to the design office and the integration is really key. And I think that's particularly what we're seeing with the New Zealand projects over the last 2 cycles of the America's Cup.
Definitely. And then there's also a little bit of Finn heritage on board with Emirates Team New Zealand, JB. You're a lover of the Finn, having been a bronze medalist in the class. And there's 2, I think, more underrated sailors on board who, with Emirates Team New Zealand, who did a great job with the flight controllers, as you say.
Yeah, I think a trend that we saw, when they went from 3-all to eventually it was 7-3. In other words, the New Zealanders won 4 races on the trot. Had a little bit of luck, there's no question about it, in terms of when Luna Rossa fell off their foils under the lee of the islands, and really they had very little opportunity to get back because there was so little wind there. But putting all that aside, we saw a sort of a trend line developing, and that is that Peter Burling, one of the great natural sailors and an engineer, graduate engineer from university in New Zealand, combined with his right-hand man Blair Tuke, they decimated the field at the Olympics, at the Rio Olympics in the 49er class. I'm told that these guys are so close that Blair doesn't even have to hear from Peter on the 49er when they're attacking. He can tell from Burling's breathing. That's how close they are, okay? And I can understand that. We see that in the military, special forces, the way people operate with each other, trust and... Anyway, so these guys are joined at the hip. That's part of that package on that boat. Then you've got Glenn Ashby. He's the magician. And he's the Australian who's the designated skipper of that Team New Zealand project. He's an Australian. It's a little bit like having an Australian as the captain of the All Blacks. It's unprecedented. But it shows the esteem and respect that Glenn Ashby has within the New Zealand sailing fraternity. And then, of course, you've got the 2 Finn sailors. Josh Jr. has just won the World Finn Championships in the Gold Cup, beating Giles Scott and everyone else around the world, some of the greatest single-handed sailors in the world. And then Andy Maloney, who's actually was ranked higher than Josh and the Finns in terms of the Olympic participation in Tokyo. Josh, I think, is the representative, having won the Gold Cup for Tokyo. But the point is that you've got these world-class sailors. I don't think that we saw the same depth of class on the Luna Rossa project. And I think that came out in the wash over the last final 4 races, where you had all these individuals subtly putting their inputs in at the right time. It wasn't noise. In other words, it wasn't overspeak. It was very, very astute observations, wind on water in particular, remembering going along at 40 knots. So it's a game changer compared to normal conventional sailing. And these very astute operators doing their thing, feeding back such that Burling tactically were making probably less mistakes when they had their nose in the front compared to Luna Rossa, because then they could play the wind shifts a little bit more boat speed, no question about it, upwind and downwind. But they were hitting the shifts more often than not, and it was a great exhibition of high-performance sailing. It's really interesting how it kind of came out on the wash in the end. Absolutely, and I know you and I got addicted to the onboard footage, JB, because we sort of could get a piece of what was going on with that team. So I've prepared, here's something I prepared earlier, a little clip from the last start when we saw Emirates Team New Zealand start to windward of Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli and make an immediate tack as the gun went. And you'll hear in this footage that they were discussing that well in advance, and just how slick the comms are coming in and out, how far in front, you've mentioned that also, JB, how far ahead they're looking as well to plan these moves. I mean, they're looking 4 or 5 moves ahead, which is something that we're potentially not used to. So, yeah, I think it's captured well in this onboard footage. So let's have a little bit of a look at that, and then we'll talk about it.
Nice 8 hits here. Charlie, just above us line. Come down 5 degrees, 5 seconds away. 3, 2, 1, all clear for down. Zoom around the bow. Keep 90. 2, 1. Finish. Sorry, out. Okay, sorry. We might have a carry on, just all good. Fine, Josh. Yeah, he is. 5 left, front. Bearing away now. Work down now. E-drive. Yeah, 5 on there. 3, 0 there. Posting there. Ports around up tech. 1, put down. Ease forward up.
1 minute to the start.
Good on him, he's 1 forward. Can't going to go out here. Step forward. Still 5 for the fence. Keep it high, guys. Keep it high. No worries. All good. All good. Coming up, Lenny. Keeps up. Still 3 for the... Can we dip there? Yep. Okay, 0 on pin. 3, 2, 1. Good one. Down to his ankle. Easing. Nothing complete. Yeah. Easing Lenny on those, brother. He's fully downwind here. He's fully downwind. Staying above the line. Yeah. Almost all the way here. Nice, guys. Good. Same with speed here, Pete. Watch standing by. 2, 1. Forward coming down. Just a sec. Spinning. 1. Forward. Yours. Spinning. Can we come down? Good angle to Bill. Nice. A little bit funky just here and then freeze back on. 9 right. Yeah, real happy with the breeze on the boundary here. I think. Good. Real good right.
Hard right. And that it was.
And how good is that communication? There's no yelling and screaming. No. There's nothing. It's just, it's like a fighter pilot in a combat, dogfight.
Yeah.
And these guys are, again, highly practiced in what they were doing. But you're talking about world best in terms of communication, succinctness of how they're going about their business. And the same on Luna Rossa too, and these other boats. A real demonstration of getting rid of the noise and purely just the pure input that's required for the right decisions to be made at the right time more often than not. And there's no such thing as a perfect race. There's mistakes being made all the time. The question is, how do you reduce the number of mistakes, maximize the number of right decisions, and as a result, maximize the performance of the boat around the track? That was a great piece of footage. Well done, Nick. I like that.
Thanks. No, I loved the onboard comms, and a big thanks to everybody behind the scenes who organised that, because and I'm going to show a little clip here of me watching JB now, just so that everybody can see that I'm not lying when I say how passionate I am about watching this sport. But it became a next level viewing experience, didn't it, JB?
Yeah.
Okay, we can laugh at my expense. Oh my gosh. Okay, Prada's up. Prada's on the foils. 30 seconds to go. Prada's popped up on the foils. Ooh, 25 seconds to go. Yeah, so I had the port cam on my port side, the starboard cam on my starboard side, the main cam in front of me, and I know you had something similar, JB.
Yeah, well, again, this onboard footage and the sound of the operators. That, to me, that was the pure gold that we saw.
Yeah. And
the way that they did their thing. Pretty hard for the commentators to try and pull the whole thing together, and they did a good job, no question. But that onboard footage was really quite spectacular.
It was next level, and something that has to be pointed out now as well is that both of these teams sailed so beautifully and so perfectly most of the time. And Emirates Team New Zealand did have a nick of speed. So when Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli made a mistake, I felt like it was amplified and emphasised, and they really had no chance to come back from any error, which is what made it all the more exciting for me. Some people called it boring. I don't call that boring. I call it, watching near perfection. But you said there can't be a perfect race. So watching them is just next level sailing. I mean, how far has our sport come, JB?
Yeah, no, it's pretty. Well, again, we're talking about Olympic level sailing, but with a larger number of people. Talking about 11 on the boats, and then there's a big mass of people behind it, 150 people, pretty much in each syndicate. So to bring all that together, the Olympic programs are much purer. It's the cutting edge of human performance, the Olympic Games, but they're much smaller projects, much less complication in terms of team leadership and so on. But to get these projects on the water like that to this level of operator skills is and what we saw with the New Zealand projects is when they did get their nose in front, then they could actually play the wind shifts. And I think that's when the depth of their onboard quality of sailors came to the fore, in my opinion, where they were able to thread the needle a little bit better than their opposition. Not much better, but a little bit, such that the leads blew out pretty fast, combining with their extra speed over the water.
So we're going to have a little bit of a look at a clip now summing up the entire America's Cup match in 1 minute. We're going to sum it up in 1 minute. And while we're watching that, JB, I think we should have a think about, did we actually see Emirates Team New Zealand get to their potential? We didn't see them sail in more than 15 knots. We didn't see them sailing that boat for any particular length of time. And now going forward, we will see the AC-75 sailing again. So we might talk about that just after we have a little bit of a look at the Cup match in 1 minute. Here we go. Yes, just 1 minute. And as you have said all along, JB, and we've been so privileged to have your point of view at various stages throughout this edition of the Cup, this win was of national importance to the New Zealand community. And we saw that with the fighter jets. We saw that with the crowds that turned out. And what a great job they did, given the situation in the rest of the world, New Zealand, to actually get this competition to happen.
That's right. So New Zealand government were the one would I believe was the major sponsor of the whole program. And the question is, okay, return on investment, because it's public money, it's not private or whatever. So that's always the big question. And of course, with COVID, they didn't have the international, patronage that they were banking on, but tremendous profile globally in terms of the New Zealand as a place of health and well-being. And I would have thought that purely just for the exposure they had on a global basis, without visitations or limited visitations, then it was a positive return on their investment. And they, of course, you have to say, they'll be heavily involved next time around for the defence of the America's Cup, because it's the All Blacks and it's Team New Zealand. They're the two biggies. That's seems to be every taxi driver. When you fly into Auckland, for example, every taxi driver is building a 50-foot boat, either in his front yard or his backyard. Everyone's into this boating business.
One of my friends from Luna Rossa, Prada Pirelli, who I've become friends with over the Cup, he was helping out with the communications team, a young 20-year-old who's just exceptionally passionate about sailing but has perfect English. His name's Marco. He said, it's not fair for us Italians, because these Kiwis, they only have a choice of 3 sports. It's either rugby or rowing or sailing as a kid, and that's it. So it's not fair.
That's right. So let me tell you a little bit of feedback I had from Glenn Ashby before this series.
Please
Glenn
do.
and I sailed in the Etchells about 9 months ago. It was fantastic. Natural talent on the boat. And he was saying the key things that came out of their 2017 defence, in terms of lessons learned, is one is that their design team, from their perspective, had to be half the design team. If they're to be successful this time around, which they have, as we've seen, if they're to be successful, their design team for the Defence of the America's Cup in, as it turns out, 2021, half of them had to be new to the world of America's Cup, on the basis that if the general philosophy of the design team is, this is how we've always done it, winning formula, let's just continue on. On that basis, from Glenn's point of view, they'd be beaten because the development curve is so steep. These projects are just getting more and more sophisticated all the time. So you go into the design studio of Team New Zealand. It's a little bit like a high school reunion. Everyone's so young.
Far out.
PhD graduates from Auckland and Wellington University and so on. All these young kids, men and women, and very, very interesting stuff. And the other aspect is, Glenn was saying, they ran out of money leading into the 2017 America's Cup, so everyone took along their own lunches. They discovered that was great because no one could complain about the food. So that was the DNA. That was the DNA of this project again. Every dollar, every Kiwi dollar was spent only on endeavouring to make that boat go faster.
So
and nothing
good.
else was.
Yeah, I
but
love
good
it.
Stuff. Yeah.
So good. And so we will have a little bit of a look at the future in just 1 minute. We've managed to see a video by McKinsey today, who helped with the artificial intelligence. We were both there in Bermuda, JB. This is me with Ashby. I wasn't able to be there this time, but this is a photo that was snapped of me. I was meant to be interviewing other people, and I saw Ashby, and you can see the mic leaders at full stretch because I just ran over to give him a big hug. It is it's next level when you win a cup, and we're all, as Australians, we're all very proud. Of course, we congratulate Emirates Team New Zealand on a beautiful job, but we're all very proud of their favourite Australian, Glenn Ashby. He's done such a good job to be part of that team for so long.
Amazing. I guess 10 or 11, I'm not sure what, world championships in the A class, highly sophisticated boats. 2012, they were fiddling around with foils with Peter Burling and Blair Tuke to win the world A class championships. That was 2012, foiling A class then. Yeah. So these guys were eating, sleeping and thinking foiling way back then. So that's the depth of knowledge and passion that the Kiwis, led by, in my opinion, Glenn Ashby, that they have for this world of foiling.
And then out of Bermuda, we heard they were using simulators, which is why we hadn't seen the cyclors out and about, because they were able to practice on their simulators. And then today, we've been privileged to see a video by McKinsey talking about the artificial intelligence that they developed to help Emirates Team New Zealand take their simulator to the next level. So, JB, if you'll indulge us, I think we might have a little bit of a look at this AI and then talk about the future of the Cup and just where our sport is headed. It's next level, isn't it?
Sure is.
Here we go.
The America's Cup is the oldest sports trophy ever.
It's got a lot of history there, and at the same time you're blending all that history with just cutting edge technology.
Most people think of what we do as we go sailing. Well, we do, but it's not sailing. We go low flying aircraft sort of on the water with great hydrodynamic and aerodynamic qualities.
The technology and the design can really make the difference between winning and losing.
You have a simulator that's completely repeatable. You can model the same weather conditions, the boat going through the same waves. However, to drive the simulator, you've got to have sailors involved in that. And they're out on the water, they're appearing in magazines and whatever. And so to actually get the right people together is a real challenge. And the sailors are not completely consistent.
I don't think we're the first team that's thought about AI The difference simply is that with working with McKinsey, what we now have, which is pretty unique and pretty advanced, probably doesn't exist in these other organisations.
What we were trying to achieve was incredibly difficult, and I was quite sceptical. And I didn't mind saying that to McKinsey at the time. We started off by getting the agent to learn how to sail in a straight line, upwind and downwind. The crucial moment was when it all of a sudden started doing upwind times and tacks and jibes that were better than the sailors were doing in the simulator.
That was a good moment, and that was the point where I was like, yep, we've got something here that is going to be useful.
Since we've been working with the AI agent and using that to drive the simulator, designers can iterate through foils in a much quicker way. What typically would take a day or several days, they can run through in a matter of hours.
The sailors, as athletes and as competitive people, wanted to ensure that there was nothing to learn from the bots, and they don't want to be beaten by a computer.
The bot does so many runs, and to be able to go down there and compare what you're doing with the bot is where we see the performance gains.
It's AI in this case, I mean, that's the future. I mean, if you haven't got good AI within a few years, you're not going to be on the page.
Did you ever think that we'd get to this point, JB, where it was man versus machine in sailing?
It's a big one, isn't it? No
yeah.
question about it. And of course the old salts will say, oh, let's go back to the old 12 metres. Well, we were sailing around going pretty fast, maybe 15 kilometres an hour. Same wind strength, these boats are travelling at 100 kilometres an hour. Okay, so... and maybe that's just the start. The usage of technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning. To me, I think it's great. I love it because it's it's just the world. It's it's utilising current thinking. But it's a different world, and some of the old salts will think, oh, it's not as good as like the old days. But from a global audience point of view, I think this is a much more interesting story. When I first got involved, it was definitely like watching painted ships on a painted ocean, except when you're on the boat, they're different. The intensity, regardless of what we're sailing, was unbelievable. But now the punter, the person in the street, can not only get an appreciation of what it's like on the boats with all this onboard content that's coming off that we've just seen, but in addition start to bend their mind around using technologies very, very similar to the world of Formula One motor racing. And we're seeing that. Ineos, Jim Ratcliffe, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, he owns 1/3 of the Mercedes race team, F1 team. And their challenge, no question, next time around will be a very, very strong combination of F1 technology with Mercedes, with the best thinking. And all of that will be included, of course, within the AI push as well. So whether you like it or not, it is the world of America's Cup, and it represents the cutting edge. I think that the America's Cup always should be on the cutting edge of technology, regardless of what some of these people say. It is just the world. I cannot imagine sailing one of the boats that I sailed, Australia 2, and having a moth or a windsurfer on foils doing 360s as you're going upwind, doing 360s around us as you're sailing upwind at full bottle. Doesn't cut it.
Indeed. And so you've then answered a lot of people's questions. Last night I did a call out for questions, and a lot of people asked, does he want to go back to displacement? Isn't he with us? And I said, I'm going to answer on his behalf now. No, but I'm sure he'll bring it up in the show. So thank you for doing exactly what I answered on your behalf.
No, these boats relate to young people as well, young imagination, young application of technology. That's what the world's all about. New startup, giving young kids a go, giving them hope. Forget about the old world. You can read about that in the books, but that's as far as you want.
Yeah, exactly. And as you just alluded to, Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the challenger of record, this is the next stage of the Cup. On the left, we have Aaron Young, who is the Commodore of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, who are the defending club once again for America's Cup 37. In the middle, we have the Rear Commodore of Sailing for the Royal Yacht Squadron, Bertie Bickett. And on the right-hand side, the skipper of Ineos Team UK, Sir Ben Ainsley, representing Ineos, of course. So this is the next stage of the Cup, JB, but AC 75s, 100% nationality rule with some exemptions, and it should be very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Big call, the 100% nationality rule that actually eliminates some really world-class sailors, particularly Australians, because they weren't included. So that's pretty interesting in terms of, okay, they can be involved with an emerging nation. Maybe Switzerland could be considered an emerging nation, even though they've won it in the past. And but at any rate, they're getting back, and that's an influence particularly from the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron. They've always pushed, and Grant Dalton in particular, pushed the nationality rule. It works in their favour too, because let's face it, they're pretty much, other than Glenn Ashby, everyone else was Kiwi, so they weren't hurt from that. Similarly with the British project, Ineos UK, it's primarily a British project, except for
few Australians.
But anyway, people, they can continue on,
yeah.
But anyway, it's alive and well, and they'll continue with these boats, it would appear. They'll be more refined. Tommy Slingsby, and earlier in the video you played, I agree. There's an opportunity to reduce costs dramatically. I believe that the Prada syndicate was actually cut down to the bones during particularly the hiatus of the pandemic, crises in Europe, when Prada had to cut their cloth accordingly, and they were not affected, which is good. So and of course the Kiwis traditionally have done it on the smell of an oil rag anyway. So there's opportunities for teams to really do this more cost effectively, and again using technology to the benefit, without having to build boats and go out in thousands of hours of testing and all that old world stuff.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing we would like more as diehard America's Cup fans, JB, than to see 12 boats out there in the Challenger Series. That would be a fantastic result at some point in the Cup's future. Whether that's this cycle, we don't know.
Yeah, that's one of the tricks with this new nationality rule. Can you actually get a large number of syndicates together when you have to have pretty much everyone coming from your own country and think that you're going to be competitive? That's the big question.
Yeah.
People have to answer themselves. Yep.
It's hard enough to get the money, as you've said, no cash, no splash, but can you do it with 100% nationality if you weren't at AC 36? Because those who were at AC 36 are exempt, so those teams can continue as they are, but as you said, with the emerging nations. But we've held you up long enough, JB. There's lots of people continuing to ask questions about an Australian challenge, and I will refer them back to earlier in our show, because we took this on early just in case this question would be asked. But maybe one more time, JB. I mean, you changed the world for a lot of people, and there are a lot of people saying thank you as well in the comments. So a big thank you to you once again for everything that you did with your Australia 2 crew as well. I've gotten to know a few more of them over the past few weeks as well. I mean, what would it mean to you to see an Australian team get back together? You don't have to answer the question of when, but what would it mean to you?
Oh, look, it's huge, particularly a highly competitive project, because you're either a hero or a bum, the reality. Okay, so first was Team New Zealand, second was Luna Rossa, but then the rest, who cares? That's the reality of sport. So you need to be competitive. But, let's face it, what we did in '83, combined our nation. And celebrations, I'm told, we're halfway around the world in Newport, Rhode Island, but I'm told the celebrations were not unlike the end of World War II. The nation stopped. They ran out of, Jim Hardy told me they ran out of champagne in Australia and green and gold ribbon, our national colours. It's just amazing how this traffic stopped on Sydney Harbour Bridge and people hugging each other, getting out of their cars. Can you believe that? Just for a sailboat race, but it was more than that. It was Australia taking on the world, and particularly the United States. So, this project, the America's Cup has that power.
Yeah.
And to pull together a project that represents the country and has a real legitimate shot at it would be something that would be pretty special. Not out of context at all. No, not at all.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we can do it one day. But as you say, you're either a winner or you're a loser. There is no second, and I know there's a lot of Australians out there who aren't prepared to be a loser. So we just have to, if it ever happens, it has to be a really good shunt. It can't be half-assed because because we have your great example to live by as well, JB. I mean, we expect a lot of our sailors, don't we?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, there's Australia and New Zealand. We really fight above our weight globally in the sailing world. The Australian Olympic sailing team are ranked number 1 in the world.
Yeah,
it's great, and we've got great talent through. Tokyo hopefully will be very, very exciting in terms of ultimate results for our sailing team, and that's just typical of what this country produces on the water.
Absolutely. And obviously, or maybe not obviously to you because you are very humble, they were probably mentored by that great feat that you took in 1983 to really help make Australians known to the world as great sailors and to give us the confidence to continue forward with your great crew of Australia too. So thanks for all you've done for sailing. Thanks for sharing this America's Cup with us all, JB. It's been an absolute pleasure, and with Rasa too, who's not on air, but I've been lucky enough to share this cup with her as well, and a number of other really, really passionate sailors. So a big thanks to you, and we look forward to seeing what happens with AC37.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick.
You're very, very welcome. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you soon with the next adventure. Nick Douglas out.